The cold rain beat against the cracked windshield of Jackie Harrison's car as she stared at the eviction notice in her lap. Another one. The third this month. After months of trying to stay afloat, it felt like the world was closing in. 2 jobs, endless nights without sleep, and her savings were down to pennies. Jackie wiped her eyes, smearing mascara across her tired face, trying to keep the tears at bay. The last thing she wanted was to break down in front of her daughters. But as she glanced in the rearview mirror, she saw their hollow eyes staring back at her. How much longer could they live like this? Living in the backseat of her car wasn't a solution, it was a nightmare that never seemed to end. Her heart ached with the weight of the eviction. With no family to lean on and no money left to pay for a new place, her future seemed as empty as her bank account. She glanced at her daughter Xana, her 10-year-old, always trying to keep the peace, and Lily, the youngest, who still believed in fairy tales and magic, though the coldness of their situation was starting to erase that innocence. They had been couch hopping for weeks, friends and acquaintances offering up their spare rooms just for a few nights before they grew tired of having a family with no place to call home. The past year had drained every ounce of hope from Jackie's body, but she kept pushing forward, determined to give her girls a better life. As she sat parked in front of a rundown diner, checking listings online on her broken phone, a small ad caught her eye. It was too good to be true. House for sale, $1, cash only. 1247 Maple Street. Jackie shook her head in disbelief, her finger hovering over the screen. What could possibly be wrong with a house for just $1? But after hours of scrolling past dilapidated places she couldn't afford, the ad seemed like a beacon in her storm. She clicked it, heart pounding, desperate for anything that might give her family a chance. She was skeptical, but decided to take the chance. After all, what did she have left to lose? With only a few dollars in her pocket and an empty tank of gas, she drove to Maple Street. Little did she know, what lay behind the decaying walls of the house would change everything for better and for worse. The house looked abandoned, its sagging porch and boarded-up windows almost daring her to step inside. But the secret buried beneath its rotting foundation was something even she couldn't have predicted. And when she uncovered it, there would be no going back. Jackie's mind raced as she turned onto Maple Street, the house looming in the distance like a ghost. She didn't know what to expect. But as her daughters gathered their things, she thought to herself, maybe this is the fresh start we need. But the moment she stepped inside the house, Jackie would soon discover that some secrets are buried for a reason. Secrets that could change her life forever and threaten to take everything away. Jackie had no idea that this seemingly forgotten house would become the center of a dangerous web, leading her straight into a moral dilemma, crime, and a treasure she never asked for. The first thing Jackie noticed as she stepped out of the car was the smell. Damp, musty, and heavy. The house on Maple Street stood like a monument to neglect, its rotting porch leaning to one side and windows boarded up as if they were hiding something or protecting the house from the world. The yard was overgrown with wild grass that reached up to her knees, and a faded for sale sign hung crookedly, barely visible behind the weeds. The house looked abandoned, a shell of what it once was. Looks haunted, Anna muttered under her breath, clutching Lily's hand as they walked toward the house. Her voice held a note of caution, but Jackie only nodded in response. Trying to mask her own unease, "It looks like it needs love," Jackie said, though she wasn't sure if she was trying to convince herself or her daughters. Her heart sank as she approached the front steps, but she wasn't ready to give up. Not yet. They needed this. They needed somewhere to call home. Something permanent. She had no idea how much it would cost to make the place livable. She only knew that she had very little left to work with. The house may have been dilapidated, but at least it was a roof. It was a chance. As they reached the front door, a grizzled old man stepped from the house next door, walking slowly with the aid of a cane. His clothes were worn, but clean, his face etched with age, and his eyes carried the weight of a man who had watched his neighborhood slowly decay. "You hear about the house?" he asked, his voice raspy. Jackie nodded. still unsure what she was about to get into. "Is it really just $1?" she asked, though her tone was more of a question to herself than to the man. The man introduced himself as William Patterson, and after a few minutes of small talk, he explained that the house had been abandoned for years. The previous owner, a man named Victor DeLuca, had passed away 3 years ago. He had no heirs, and the city had been stuck trying to find someone to take responsibility for the property. Taxes were unpaid, and it had fallen into complete disrepair. "There's nothing left for it," Patterson added, his gaze darkening as he eyed the house. "It'll cost you 50 grand to make it livable. And anyone with 50 grand isn't looking at dollar houses." Jackie felt a tightness in her chest as she glanced at her daughters. She didn't need anyone to tell her the obvious, that the house was falling apart, that it was in a terrible state. She could see that for herself. But the alternative was worse. She was out of options. "What's wrong with it?" Jackie asked, although she could already guess the answer. Patterson paused, his eyes searching hers. "The foundation's solid," he said finally, "but the roof leaks, plumbing's shot, electrical from the 40s, and there's probably asbestos in the walls. And every spring, the basement floods." Jackie nodded slowly, taking in the words, but not fully processing them. It didn't matter. What she needed was a fresh start. She needed this house to work. She needed something to believe in. This, even if it was broken and haunted, was all she had left. As they made their way back to the car, she took a deep breath. For the first time in a long while, she allowed herself to imagine what if this house could really be their home. The hope burned bright in her chest, but deep down, Jackie knew one thing. She was walking into something far darker than she could understand. The house had secrets, and the more she uncovered, the more she would realize that some things are better left hidden, and she was about to find out exactly what those secrets were. If you're excited to dive into this story, hit that like button and let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. We'd love to hear from you and connect with readers from all around the world. Let's get started. The air was damp and cool as Jackie Harrison stepped out of the car with her two daughters, Anna and Lily, trailing closely behind. The faint smell of wet earth mixed with the unmistakable scent of decay, and a heavy silence seemed to hang over the neighborhood. The sun had barely peeked through the clouds, casting a dull light over the street, making the abandoned houses look even more forlorn. "Mom, are you sure this is it?" Anna asked, her voice tinged with skepticism as she stared at the house ahead of them. Jackie took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. The house on 1247 Maple Street looked like it had been forgotten by time and possibly the world itself. The sagging roof seemed ready to collapse at any moment, and the peeling paint on the wooden exterior looked like it hadn't seen a coat of fresh paint in decades. The windows were either cracked or boarded up, and the front porch creaked ominously under the weight of its own neglect. The front yard, once probably manicured with care, now seemed like an overgrown jungle. Tall weeds swayed in the wind, and vines crept up the sides of the house, almost as if nature itself was trying to reclaim it. The entire scene felt like something out of a horror movie, and Jackie could almost hear the creak of the old wood as the house groaned under its weight. Lily tugged at Jackie's sleeve, her wide eyes taking in the eerie surroundings. "It looks haunted," she whispered. Jackie's heart squeezed. She smiled, though the gesture didn't quite reach her eyes. "It looks like it needs love," she replied softly, glancing at her daughters. It was a promise, even if she wasn't sure how it could be fulfilled. As they approached the house, a man emerged from the house next door. His frail body was hunched with age, and he moved slowly with a cane, taking deliberate steps as he approached Jackie. His clothes were neat, but worn, and his eyes carried the sadness of someone who had witnessed years of neglect in his own backyard. "You hear about the house?" he asked, his voice gravelly with age. Jackie nodded. "Is this really the one for sale for just $1?" she asked, trying to keep the disbelief from her voice. The old man chuckled softly. "Yeah, that's the one. Name's Mr. Patterson." He nodded toward the house. "Been trying to get it off the city's hands for years. Owner died, No heirs, taxes unpaid. They just want someone to take it off their hands. They'll get $1 from you, and they'll stop mowing the jungle out front." Jackie raised an eyebrow. "What's wrong with it?" Mr. Patterson shuffled closer to her, his eyes scanning the house as though it might fall down at any second. "Well, it's been empty for years. The roof leaks, the plumbing's shot, and the wiring's from the 1940s. Hell, there's probably asbestos in the walls. The basement floods every spring. There's a whole list of things wrong with it. But the foundation's solid, built on bedrock. That's the only thing that's kept it standing all this time." He paused for a moment, studying Jackie's face. "But you don't look like you're house hunting for fun." Jackie felt a heat rise to her cheeks. The weight of her situation must have been written all over her face. She forced a smile, trying to appear confident. "We're just looking for a fresh start," she said quietly, glancing down at Anna and Lily, who were clinging to her side, their eyes wide with uncertainty. Mr. Patterson's expression softened. He nodded slowly, as if understanding exactly what she meant. "Kids yours?" "Yes," Jackie replied. "They've been staying with friends, but—" She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. They'd overstayed their welcome, and they couldn't keep moving from couch to couch. The elderly man studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Tell you what," he said slowly, his voice taking on a more serious tone. "City Hall closes in an hour. If you're serious about it, I can walk you through the process. I used to work in the assessor's office before I retired. But you need to understand what you're getting into, with no more time to waste." Jackie looked at Anna and Lily, their faces, full of hope yet fear, made her heart ache. This could be their chance. Maybe the house was a wreck, but it was theirs if she could make it happen. With determination, she nodded. "Okay, let's go." The three of them followed Mr. Patterson down the street, where Jackie found herself standing in front of a small, nondescript building with an even more unremarkable city clerk behind the counter. The man smirked as he shuffled through some paperwork, clearly entertained by the idea of someone buying a house for $1. "Sign here, here, and here," he muttered, pushing a stack of papers toward her. "Hope you've got good insurance, though. This one's a fixer-upper, all right?" Jackie signed the papers, the pen shaking slightly in her hand. How had she ended up here? A few months ago, she would have laughed at the idea of buying a house for $1. Now, she was signing away her last hope for stability and a future. Mr. Patterson handed her the key to the house with a sardonic smile. "Good luck with your mansion," he said, before adding with a wink, "Hope you're prepared for what's inside." Jackie's fingers curled around the cold metal key as she stepped out of City Hall. The weight of it felt heavy in her hand. She glanced at Anna and Lily, their eyes wide, but filled with a glimmer of hope. It was as if they were seeing something she couldn't, possibilities she hadn't dared to dream of. Maybe they were right to believe in something more. When they reached the house, the rain had started to fall again, heavier now. The house loomed in front of them, casting a long shadow as if to warn them. Jackie hesitated for just a moment before turning the key in the door. The door creaked open with a sound that echoed through the empty house. The house, with all its faded grandeur and long-forgotten potential, seemed to breathe with them as they stepped inside. But even as the promise of a fresh start swirled in her head, Jackie couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into something much darker, something that had been hidden for years. And as she stepped into the house, she would soon learn that some secrets are buried for a reason. The cold of the house hit them as soon as Jackie opened the door. A biting chill that seemed to seep into every corner of the dark rooms. The house creaked under the weight of its years, the sounds echoing like whispers in the emptiness. The faint hum of the wind outside mixed with the eerie groans of the wooden beams. Jackie couldn't remember the last time she'd felt so unsettled. The walls, sagging with neglect, seemed to hold secrets, and the silence inside felt heavier than the weight of their belongings in the backseat of her car. Jackie dropped her bag by the door, glancing at her daughters. Anna, the eldest, had already made herself comfortable on one of the worn-out blankets Jackie had managed to salvage from the back of the car. She sat there, hugging her knees, her face shadowed in the dim light. Lily was playing with her stuffed animal in the corner, oblivious to the darkness that surrounded them. "Mom, are we really staying here?" Anna's voice broke the stillness. Jackie's heart tightened. She turned to face her daughter, forcing a smile she didn't feel. "Yeah, honey, we are," she said, her voice more confident than she felt. "This is our new home. We'll fix it up. We'll make it work." Anna didn't answer right away. She just stared at the floor, her eyes distant. "I don't like it here," she muttered, her voice tinged with fear. "It feels wrong." Jackie sighed, sitting down beside her. "I know it's not perfect, but we'll make it better. This is our fresh start, remember?" Anna nodded slowly, but Jackie could see the doubt in her eyes. They were all struggling, but her daughter seemed to carry a particular weight, perhaps the burden of being the oldest. The one who was supposed to take care of the younger ones. The first night was a test of endurance. Without electricity, there was no warmth, no lights to guide them. Jackie lit a few candles and scattered them around the house, but they didn't provide much comfort. The shadows danced across the walls, and the sound of the rain, now pouring heavily, made the house feel even more desolate. The leaky roof had started to drip almost immediately, each drop a reminder of the work that lay ahead. Water fell onto the floor with a steady rhythm, as if marking the passage of time in a place that had long since been forgotten. Jackie didn't sleep much. She spent her time moving from room to room, collecting buckets to catch the rainwater and patching the leaks with whatever she could find. The tools she had were makeshift, cobbled together from the few things she could afford, but it didn't stop the water from pouring through the cracks in the roof. She found herself running between the basement and the upstairs, trying to cover each leak as best as she could. Her hands were cold and raw from the work, but she didn't mind. She couldn't afford to stop. The house seemed to fight back against her efforts. Every step Jackie took echoed through the house, the floorboards groaning under her weight, like the house was protesting her presence. The creaking of the walls, the whispers of a forgotten past, made her skin crawl. And through it all, she could hear her daughter's restless breathing, knowing they were as scared as she was. In the quiet of the night, Anna's voice cut through the darkness again. "Mom, how long are we going to stay here?" Jackie paused, her hand on the cracked floorboard she had been trying to repair. She didn't have an answer. "We'll stay as long as we need to, sweetheart," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "We'll fix it, I promise." But deep down, she wondered if she was lying to them. Was it even possible to fix this place? The leaks, the broken plumbing, the lack of heat. She had no idea what she was doing. She wasn't a contractor. She wasn't a builder. She was just a mother trying to give her children something stable, something real. But every night she spent here, every bucket she placed under a leak, it felt like she was fighting an enemy she couldn't see, let alone defeat. The next morning, Jackie woke early, even before the girls. She grabbed the broken faucet from the bathroom sink and set to work with a pair of pliers she'd bought from the dollar store. She didn't have much, but she could make do with what she had. U2 became her silent partner as she watched tutorial after tutorial, learning how to patch walls, fix pipes, and seal up cracks. It wasn't glamorous, but it was all she had. Every time she finished a small project, whether it was fixing a leak or covering a hole in the wall, she felt a brief glimmer of hope. Anna helped her where she could, carrying buckets of water and cleaning up the mess in the bathroom. But it was clear to Jackie that her daughter's spirit had dimmed overnight. The house, with its broken windows and leaks, was weighing on Anna's heart, just as it was weighing on her own. Lily, ever the optimist, tried to bring light to the day. She wandered around the house, humming to herself as she picked up bits of trash and debris. She wasn't quite old enough to understand the full gravity of their situation, but Jackie could see the spark of innocence still alive in her youngest. It gave her the strength to keep going. As the days passed, Jackie worked tirelessly to make the house livable. She couldn't afford to hire anyone to help. Every penny she had was going toward the basics: food, gas, and whatever materials she could find to patch the house up. Each day felt like an endless battle against time, against the elements, against the walls that seemed to close in on them. But through it all, she kept pushing forward, determined to keep her promise to her daughters. The days were long, and the nights were even longer. There was always something that needed fixing. The roof leaked again. The basement flooded. The plumbing backed up. Jackie's body was exhausted, her hands calloused from the work, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. For Anna, for Lily, for herself, she had made a vow when they first stepped through the door of 1247 Maple Street. This was their fresh start. And no matter how hard it got, no matter how broken the house seemed, she wasn't going to let them go through another night in the cold, in the dark, in the back seat of a car. But even as she fixed the house, a nagging feeling gnawed at the back of her mind. Something about the house didn't feel right. There was more here than just broken pipes and peeling paint. Jackie couldn't shake the feeling that the house was holding onto something, a secret buried deep within its walls. And the longer they stayed, the more the house seemed to want to reveal it. The house felt different that night. As Jackie patched up yet another leak in the upstairs hallway, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching her. The walls seemed to groan louder than usual, and the floorboards creaked with every step. It was subtle at first, just the feeling of being observed, as if someone or something was standing in the dark corners of the house. But the longer she stayed, the more she began to feel like the house itself was alive. It wasn't just the sounds. Objects started moving on their own. A chair she'd left by the kitchen table was found in the hallway the next morning, facing the wall. The old wooden broom she kept by the back door had vanished from its usual spot, only to be found propped up against the window the next day. Jackie tried to chalk it up to her exhaustion, or maybe the house shifting under the pressure of its age. But the unease lingered. One evening, as the girls settled into bed and the house fell into an oppressive silence, Jackie decided to take a walk downstairs. The basement had been a constant reminder of the house's state of disrepair. The heavy smell of dampness was suffocating, the air thick with the musty scent of mold and rotting wood. She had avoided it for weeks, knowing that anything down there would be one more thing she couldn't fix. But that night, something urged her to finally face it. The stairs creaked beneath her feet as she descended into the darkness, the flashlight in her hand cutting through the blackness. The beam wavered in the silence, reflecting off the wet walls. She could hear the faint drip of water, the constant reminder of the leaky roof. But this time, there was something else, a low whisper, barely audible, like the sound of wind moving through cracks. Jackie froze, her breath catching in her throat. She turned slowly, looking around the dim space, but there was no one. No one but the walls, the floor, and the growing sense of something hidden. Then she saw it. In the far corner of the basement, she noticed a section of the stone wall that looked different from the rest. The mortar was newer, lighter in color, and smoother, as if it had been patched recently. She couldn't remember seeing it before. Maybe she had missed it, but that didn't make sense. She had been in and out of this basement so many times, it seemed impossible she could have overlooked this. Her heart raced. She stepped closer, tracing her fingers along the uneven stones, feeling the subtle difference beneath her touch. The rest of the basement was crumbling, covered in moss, water-stained, and neglected. This patch of wall was far too neat. It was out of place. With shaking hands, Jackie pulled a crowbar from the corner where she had left it after a failed attempt at fixing a loose board earlier that week. She wedged the edge of the bar into the gap between the stones and gave it a hard push. The wall groaned as the mortar cracked. She pulled again, harder this time, and a stone popped loose. Then another. Soon, a gap large enough to fit her hand opened up. The cold air rushed in, as if the wall had been holding its breath. Her pulse quickened as she pried the last stone free. The dark space behind the wall was unlike anything Jackie had expected. The beam of her flashlight flickered as she shone it into the small, hidden room. Metal boxes, old ammunition cases stacked from floor to ceiling, their rusty exteriors reflecting the dim light. Jackie's breath hitched. The smell of stale air mixed with something else, something metallic. But it wasn't the smell of the damp basement, it was different, heavy. She stepped back, feeling the weight of her decision. What was this place? And why had it been hidden for so long? Her fingers trembled as she moved closer, carefully prying open one of the boxes. Inside, her eyes widened in shock. Raw gold, stacks of diamonds, and artifacts, antique items that looked far too valuable to be forgotten here, hidden away in an abandoned house. A treasure beyond her wildest imagination. She could barely comprehend it at first, the pieces of gold reflecting her flashlight's beam, the sparkle of the diamonds that seemed to mock her humble existence. The boxes weren't empty, though. Many of them had been broken open, their contents spilling out onto the floor. Gold nuggets, glistening and heavy. Some were rough, jagged, others smooth, polished. She bent down, scooping up a handful. The weight of it made her knees buckle. She had never seen anything like it, diamonds that shone so brightly they seemed to hum with their own energy. This wasn't just some forgotten stash. It was a fortune. A fortune she couldn't afford to ignore. But as she knelt among the boxes, the weight of what she had found began to sink in. The gold, the diamonds, this wasn't some accidental discovery. This had been hidden for a reason. And it was connected to the history of this house. She remembered the old neighbor's words, Mr. Patterson's cryptic warning. The previous owner, Victor DeLuca, a notorious criminal, smuggling, illegal artifact trading. Jackie's blood ran cold. This was no simple treasure. This was a part of something much darker. A legacy of crime, deception, and betrayal. And now, somehow, it was hers. By accident, by chance, by sheer desperation, Jackie stepped back, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of it all. Was it wrong to keep this? Was it a sign, a blessing? Or was it a trap? She had no answers, only more questions. She could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. This treasure, this unbelievable fortune could change everything. It could pull her out of the pit she had been living in for so long. She could buy a house, pay off her debts, secure a future for Anna and Lily, but at what cost? What would it mean for her family's safety? What kind of people had left this treasure behind? And if the authorities discovered it, would she end up in a jail cell, the very place she had been running from her entire life? As the question swirled in her mind, she knew one thing for certain: her life and the lives of her daughters had just become infinitely more complicated. The house, once a symbol of hope, had become something else entirely. It was a ticking time bomb, and the treasure in the basement was the fuse. Jackie stood there, surrounded by gold and diamonds, the weight of her discovery sinking in. She couldn't keep it, but could she let it go? Jackie spent the next few days in a haze, trying to process the treasure in her basement, while her mind raced with questions and concerns. What she had discovered wasn't just gold and diamonds. It was a story, a dark, twisted history that, once uncovered, seemed to taunt her every time she stepped into the house, determined to learn more. Jackie started researching the history of the house, knowing she couldn't ignore the ominous weight that pressed down on her every time she entered. She knew the house had been abandoned for years, but the full history, the story of its last owner, Victor DeLuca, would shed light on the questions that haunted her. DeLuca wasn't just a former resident of the house, he was a criminal mastermind. Jackie found old newspaper articles and forgotten records, pieces of a puzzle that hadn't been solved in decades. Victor DeLuca had been involved in smuggling rings, trafficking rare artifacts, and running a network that reached across international borders. His name was synonymous with criminal activity in the late 80s and early 90s, a man whose web of deceit had ensnared countless people. But in the early 90s, DeLuca had disappeared. One day, he simply vanished, leaving behind a trail of chaos and unsolved crimes. Authorities had searched high and low for him, but no one had ever found a trace. And then, the house had been abandoned, left to decay, its former glory faded into dust. Jackie's heart sank as she pieced together the information, realizing that the treasure in her basement was no accident. It was part of DeLuca's legacy, his illicit activities, his carefully hidden wealth. The gold and diamonds she had found had been stashed away, out of sight, for someone else to find. But why had it been left for so long? Why had it remained hidden for decades? As Jackie's research continued, the more she came to believe that there was something inherently wrong with the house, something that had been buried with DeLuca's treasure. The rumors of the house being haunted weren't just exaggerated tales or figments of her imagination. The place was haunted, not by ghosts, but by the sins of its past, the blood spilled in its name, and the curses that came with it. The unsettling whispers, the strange movements of objects, the sensation of being watched, it all made sense now. The house wasn't just old. It was a vessel for something much darker. Jackie sat in the dim glow of the kitchen light, a cup of coffee in her hand, trying to steady her nerves. The house creaked and groaned around her, as though it had come alive. It was hard to distinguish the sounds of the house settling from the eerie feeling of something or someone lurking in the shadows. Every door seemed to whisper in the night. Every crack in the walls seemed to grow louder. The paranoia started slowly, but grew with each passing day. At night, she could hear noises, faint scratching sounds coming from the walls, distant thumps like footsteps in the attic. She would wake, drenched in sweat, to the sound of whispers just beyond her reach. Her daughters, too, seemed to sense it. Anna had started to stay up late, looking out the windows as if waiting for someone to appear. Lily, always the more imaginative one, would clutch her stuffed animal and whisper about the shadow man who watched them when they slept. At first, Jackie had dismissed it as fear from the instability they'd been living through. But now, she wasn't so sure. She walked the halls at night, flashlight in hand, scanning the dark corners where shadows seemed to move of their own accord. The house, she realized, was alive. It was haunted not just by spirits, but by the very actions that had transpired within it: the betrayal, the greed, the violence. The treasure she had uncovered wasn't just a financial windfall. It was a curse, one that had been waiting for the right person to uncover it. The weight of her discovery began to press on her. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone else was out there, someone who knew about the treasure and wanted it back. Her eyes darted nervously every time the doorbell rang, or when a car slowed down in front of the house. It was as though the world was closing in on her. Every creak of the floorboards another reminder that the house was not just her home, but something more dangerous, a ticking time bomb. Her moral conflict was tearing her apart. The treasure could change everything for her family. It could provide a stable future for Anna and Lily. It could erase the years of hardship, the endless cycles of debt and struggle. She thought about the pile of bills stacking up on the kitchen counter, the bank account in the red, the eviction notices that seemed to appear one after the other. For the first time in years, Jackie saw a way out. All she had to do was keep the treasure, sell it, and her problems would be solved. But the weight of what it represented, the blood, the crime, the danger, made her hesitate. The fear of getting caught, the moral implications of keeping stolen goods, the potential danger from those who might come looking for it all weighed heavily on her. Was it worth the risk? And if she kept it, what would it cost her? The house itself seemed to sense her indecision. As she stood in the kitchen, staring at the faded wallpaper, she heard a soft knock at the door. Jackie froze, her heart skipping a beat. It was too late for anyone to be visiting. She walked slowly toward the door, every step making the creaking floorboards echo in the silence. Her hand hovered over the doorknob, and for a brief moment, she considered not answering. But then, she gritted her teeth and turned it. The door opened to reveal no one, only a single, small note, tucked into the crack of the door. "I know what you found." Jackie's blood ran cold as she reached for the note. It was written in a hurried, slanted script, and as she read it, she felt the walls closing in. Whoever had left this note knew what was in her basement, and that could only mean one thing. Her past had finally caught up with her. In that moment, Jackie realized there was no going back. The house was not just a place to live, it was the beginning of a nightmare. A nightmare she would have to navigate if she ever hoped to survive the curse of the house and the treasure buried within it. Jackie sat at the kitchen table, her fingers nervously tracing the edges of the note that had been left at the door. The words were still fresh in her mind. "I know what you found." Her heart pounded with an unnerving certainty someone knew. Someone was watching her. But who and why? It wasn't long before the phone calls started. First, a blocked number. Then, a knock on the door late one evening, followed by the sound of heavy boots outside the window. But it wasn't just the unknown figures lurking around the house that made her nervous. Word had gotten out. By the time Jackie had returned from dropping the girls off at school, the front yard was filled with unmarked cars. A single, official-looking black sedan parked in front of the house, and men in dark suits stood in clusters, whispering to one another. Jackie's pulse quickened. The FBI. They had arrived. Her phone buzzed, and Jackie's hand shook as she picked it up. It was an email from a local news outlet asking for a comment on a story they were running about a stolen treasure believed to be tied to Victor DeLuca. The weight of that name made her stomach twist. She'd done nothing to publicize her discovery, so how had they found out? Someone was watching her, and now, it seemed, the entire country might be too. Steeling herself, Jackie grabbed her coat and walked out the front door. The agents didn't acknowledge her at first, but as she neared, one of them tall, with dark eyes turned and approached her. "Miss Harrison?" the agent asked, his voice sharp. Jackie nodded. "Yes, we need to talk," the agent said. "We have reason to believe that you may have uncovered something tied to a major criminal case. Do you mind if we ask you a few questions?" The agent's gaze was unreadable, but Jackie could tell that the air had shifted, that something had changed. She was no longer just a woman trying to make a living in a broken-down house. She was now caught in the net of something much larger, something that involved the FBI and the criminal underworld. Inside, Jackie felt a surge of panic. She glanced back at her daughters, who were playing in the yard. Her instinct screamed to run to protect them from whatever was about to happen. But she stayed still, her mind spinning with the realization that there was no escaping this nightmare. As the agent led her inside to the living room, another car pulled up, this one with tinted windows. Jackie's heart raced, her pulse thudding in her ears. She recognized one of the men who got out. It was Tony Romano, the very same name she had read in the articles about DeLuca's associates. The one who had vanished shortly after DeLuca's disappearance in the 90s. Tony Romano was one of the key figures in DeLuca's operation, and now he was standing in front of her house. Jackie froze, her mind flashing back to the note she had found. It hadn't been the FBI watching her, it had been people connected to DeLuca's past. And they were here for what she had found. Tony's eyes scanned the house before meeting Jackie's, a smile creeping across his face. "Ms. Harrison," he said, his voice smooth but edged with a threatening undertone. "I believe you've come into possession of something that doesn't belong to you." The FBI agent, seeing the tension in the air, stepped forward. "Tony," he said, voice cold and steady, "this is an investigation. We're not here to negotiate with you." Tony's expression remained unchanged. "Of course. But I don't think Miss Harrison here has any idea what she's dealing with. This treasure, this gold, has a history. A very dangerous history." He turned back to Jackie, his eyes narrowing. "And now, you're holding something that belongs to people much bigger than you." Jackie's breath caught in her throat. She looked between the two men, her mind struggling to catch up. She hadn't been ready for this. She thought the FBI would be the problem, not people like Tony, who had ties to the very criminals whose treasure she'd found. As the tension thickened, the agent spoke again, his tone no nonsense. "Tony, you need to leave. We're taking over this case." Tony didn't budge. Instead, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "You think you can handle this, FBI?" he said, unfolding it slowly. "You're about to find out the hard way just how deep this goes. Because you're not the only ones who know about the treasure." Jackie's eyes widened as Tony's words sank in. "There were others." More people who wanted the treasure, and they weren't here to negotiate. Suddenly, there was a loud noise at the back of the house, a loud banging on the door. Jackie turned, instinctively moving toward the kitchen to check. As she did, she saw figures moving across the yard, more men, dressed in dark coats, making their way to the door. The agents, realizing what was happening, drew their weapons, but it was too late. The door crashed open with violent force. The men who stormed in weren't just looking for answers. They were after what Jackie had found, and they weren't going to let anyone stand in their way. For the first time since she discovered the treasure, Jackie realized just how much danger her family was in. The walls were closing in on all sides. The FBI was here to investigate, but they weren't the only threat. DeLuca's associates had come, and they weren't leaving without what was theirs. Jackie's heart pounded, and for a moment, she thought about grabbing her daughters and running. But where could she go? The FBI had already set up a perimeter, and outside, it was clear that someone would stop at nothing to get their hands on the gold. The stakes were higher now than she ever could have imagined. With criminals at her door and the law breathing down her neck, Jackie realized she had to make a choice. And it had to be soon. Who could she trust? And was there any way out of this mess she had unwillingly walked into? In that moment, she understood something with terrifying clarity. There was no turning back now. The afternoon light slipped through the cracks in the boarded-up windows, casting long shadows across the dimly lit living room. Jackie sat hunched over the kitchen table, trying to keep her hands steady as she sifted through papers, endless forms, and documents about the house, the treasure, the consequences. Her mind was a whirlwind of panic and uncertainty. Each word she read seemed to carry the weight of the world, but it wasn't just the fear of the FBI or DeLuca's men that gnawed at her. It was her daughter's growing distance. Olivia hadn't been the same lately. It was hard to ignore the silence at the dinner table, the way she barely looked at Jackie anymore. Her eyes clouded with doubt. Jackie had tried to shrug it off after all. What mother wouldn't be a little paranoid with everything that had been happening? But the truth was, Olivia wasn't just being a normal teenager. She was too perceptive, too smart for her own good. Jackie had caught her several times, watching her with a mixture of concern and confusion in her eyes, as if she could see through every smile, every excuse Jackie made. The breaking point came one evening as Jackie was closing up the house after a long day of repairs. The house was still far from livable, but there were small victories: a working faucet here, a repaired light there. Nothing could prepare her for what would happen next. Jackie's phone buzzed with an incoming call, and she glanced at the number. Unknown, it was the kind of number she had learned to avoid. Her heart skipped a beat. This was it. She answered cautiously, her voice low, unsure whether the line would be secure. "I'll take care of it soon," she said in a hushed tone, "but I need more time. The girls can't know about this." She glanced around the room nervously. Olivia had slipped in from the back door, quiet as a shadow, and Jackie hadn't noticed until the sound of footsteps alerted her. Olivia was standing just behind her, arms crossed. Her face was unreadable, but Jackie could feel the weight of her stare. The conversation was barely over before Jackie's stomach sank. Olivia's voice broke the silence. "Who was that?" she asked, her voice small but firm. Jackie's mind raced for an answer, but she found none. She turned around slowly, trying to gauge Olivia's reaction, trying to read her daughter's expression. "It was nothing, sweetheart. Just some business," Jackie said, trying to sound convincing. Olivia didn't buy it. She'd been distant for weeks now, but there was something different in the air tonight, a quiet fury, an unspoken question that hung between them. "You've been acting strange lately, Mom," Olivia said, her voice wavering. "Ever since we moved in here, you've been getting weird calls, and now you're meeting people in the middle of the night. I overheard you talking about disposing of the goods. What's going on?" Jackie's heart thudded in her chest, but she tried to remain calm, keep her composure. Olivia was only 10, but she had an uncanny ability to see things no one else noticed. Jackie reached out, but Olivia stepped back, her eyes narrowing. I didn't want to tell you this, Jackie began, her voice strained, but things have gotten complicated. We've found something dangerous. And it's not just about us anymore. I didn't want to burden you with it. Olivia's face tightened with frustration. You've been hiding things from me, from all of us. You keep saying it's going to be okay, but it's not. I can feel it, Mom. What are you really doing? Jackie opened her mouth to speak, but the words died in her throat. How could she explain this? How could she explain the treasure, the criminals, the law enforcement? How could she tell her daughter that she was caught between losing her family's future and putting them in even greater danger? Olivia, I'm doing this for us, Jackie said, her voice breaking. You don't understand. Everything I've done for you and Lily. Please trust me. Olivia looked away, and Jackie's heart shattered. The trust that had once been so unconditional between them was slipping through her fingers like sand. I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Olivia whispered before turning and walking out of the room, leaving Jackie alone with the cold, unsettling silence of the house. Hours later, as Jackie lay awake in the dark, the weight of the conversation pressed heavily on her chest. Olivia's words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of how far things had spiraled. Jackie had never wanted any of this. She had never asked for the treasure, for the danger, for the lies. She only wanted a better life for her children. A life where they didn't have to fear sleeping in the backseat of a car or wondering where their next meal would come from. But now, the future she had hoped for seemed more fragile than ever. The FBI was breathing down her neck, DeLuca's associates were circling like vultures, and Olivia was slipping further away. And then, the phone rang again. This time, there was no hesitation. Jackie answered, bracing herself for whatever would come next. Miss Harrison. The voice on the other end was calm, professional, but there was a note of urgency. We need to talk. The FBI agent's words hit her like a punch to the stomach. They knew. They had been watching. They weren't going to let her go without making a deal. We have a proposition, the agent continued. If you cooperate and return the treasure, your family will be placed under witness protection. A fresh start. A new life. In exchange, you give us everything you found. Jackie's mind spun. Return the treasure. She thought about the diamonds, the gold, the wealth that could change everything for her daughters. But she also knew that keeping it meant risking not just her life, but Olivia's, Lily's, and everything she had worked so hard to protect. Think about it, the agent said. The law is closing in on you, and the consequences are severe. We're offering you a way out, a chance to make things right. Jackie's breath hitched. The temptation to secure her family's future was almost overwhelming. But at what cost? Her heart pounded as she struggled to find the right words. I need to think, she whispered, her voice barely a breath. She hung up the phone, but the decision still loomed in front of her like a dark, menacing figure. She had to make a choice: return the treasure and live with the consequences, or keep it and face the very real danger of losing everything. And in the silence of the night, as she lay beside her daughters, Jackie realized just how much was at stake. She could no longer hide from the truth. The breaking point had arrived. The house was silent, save for the soft hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen and the occasional creak of the old floorboards beneath Jackie's feet. It was late, far past the time when she should have been asleep, but sleep had become a luxury she could no longer afford. Jackie stood in the living room, staring at the dark hallway leading to the bedrooms. Her heart pounded as her thoughts spun in endless circles, each one pulling her deeper into a web of guilt, fear, and uncertainty. Her daughters had gone to bed hours ago, but sleep had eluded them all. She knew that Olivia, who had been acting distant for days now, was awake in her room, struggling with the same weight of the house's dark secrets. Jackie couldn't remember the last time they had spoken openly, the last time Olivia had trusted her without hesitation. The walls between them had only grown thicker as the days went on. The lies, the secrecy. Jackie had thought she was protecting her family, but all she had done was push them away. It was Olivia's voice that finally broke the silence. Mom, Jackie turned around to see Olivia standing at the edge of the hallway, her arms wrapped tightly around her chest. Her face was pale, her eyes red from crying, and the look of pain in them was too much for Jackie to bear. Olivia's voice was barely a whisper, but it carried the weight of months of confusion, fear, and unanswered questions. "What's going on, Mom? Why are you acting like this? I need to know the truth." Jackie's heart sank. She had known this moment was coming, but now that it was here, she was frozen. The time for lies had passed. There was no more pretending. Olivia stepped closer, her voice trembling. "Why are we still here? Why haven't we left yet? And why are you so obsessed with that house? What's really going on with the treasure?" Jackie swallowed hard, her throat tight as she fought to hold back the tears. She had been trying to protect her daughter from the truth, but now she realized that by doing so, she had only made everything worse. Olivia had a right to know about the treasure, about DeLuca, about everything. Taking a deep breath, Jackie walked toward her daughter, her mind racing. She had never wanted to burden Olivia with the weight of what she had discovered, but the truth had a way of creeping out when it was least expected. "Olivia," Jackie began, her voice low and strained. "I should have told you sooner. I should have told you everything, but I didn't know how. This house, it's not just a house. It's a trap that I fell into because I was trying to fix things, to make our lives better. But now, it's so much worse than I ever imagined." Olivia looked at her mother with wide eyes, her confusion turning into something darker: fear, maybe, or anger. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice barely audible. Jackie took a steadying breath, forcing herself to meet her daughter's gaze. "I found something. In the basement. Gold, diamonds, artifacts. It's worth a lot of money, more money than I ever dreamed possible." Olivia's brow furrowed. But Jackie continued, her words coming faster now, the truth spilling out like it had been trapped inside her for too long. "But it's not just money, Olivia. This treasure belongs to someone dangerous. Victor DeLuca. He was a criminal, involved in smuggling, in illegal artifact trading. He disappeared years ago, but his associates are still out there, and they want the treasure back. They're not the only ones. The FBI is involved too. They think I'm connected to DeLuca's crimes. They're watching us, and I don't know what to do." The silence in the room was deafening. Olivia's face had gone pale, and her eyes searched Jackie's face for signs that this was just another one of her stories. But it wasn't. It was real. "So, you've been hiding this from me," Olivia whispered, "all this time. And you've been keeping secrets from us? You've been hiding the gold from me. From everyone?" Jackie's heart broke at the accusation, but she didn't shy away from it. She had kept secrets, yes, but only because she thought she was protecting them, protecting Olivia. She had thought that keeping the treasure would somehow solve their problems, but now she saw how much harm it had caused. She saw the distance between them, the trust that had been shattered, and she felt the weight of the consequences of her choices. "I didn't want to tell you, Olivia. I didn't want you to have to carry this. I thought maybe if I could just fix things, we could finally be okay. But I can't keep this from you anymore." Olivia's eyes welled with tears. "I don't understand, Mom. You always tell me that honesty is the most important thing. But now I don't know what to believe." Jackie closed the gap between them, reaching out to pull Olivia into a hug. The warmth of her daughter's small body against hers felt like a lifeline. "I'm sorry," Jackie whispered, her voice shaking. "I never meant to hurt you. I've made so many mistakes. But I will fix this. I'll make it right." Olivia pulled away from the hug, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "How?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How are you going to fix it?" Jackie took a deep breath, her decision already made. "I'm going to return it," she said softly. "I'm going to give the treasure back. I'll cooperate with the FBI, and we'll be okay. We'll get through this, together." Olivia looked at her with a mix of relief and sadness in her eyes. "But what about everything? The money? The future?" "I've realized, Olivia, That money isn't worth all of this. What matters is us. Our family. I've lost sight of that, and I'm sorry." Jackie took Olivia's hand in hers, squeezing it tightly. "The right thing to do is to let it go, and that's what I'm going to do. It might be hard, but we'll make it." The air between them felt lighter, though the heaviness of the decision still lingered. But for the first time in weeks, Jackie felt a sense of peace. She had chosen the right path. No matter the consequences, she knew that giving up the treasure was the only way to move forward. For herself, for Olivia, for Lily. Olivia smiled faintly, her tear-streaked face softening. "You always know what's best, Mom," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Jackie nodded, a bittersweet smile crossing her lips. "I hope so, sweetheart. I really hope so." The sun was setting behind the small, cozy house that Jackie and her daughters had moved into just 2 weeks ago. The warm glow of the evening light reflected off the freshly painted porch, and for the first time in months, the house felt like a real home. There were no leaks, no damp basement to hide secrets in, and no creaking floors to remind them of a past filled with anxiety and fear. It was just a simple, quiet home, a place where they could finally rest, heal, and rebuild. Jackie stood in the doorway, watching her daughters, Olivia and Lily, play in the yard. They were laughing, their faces glowing with joy, something she hadn't seen in a long time. There was a peace now, a peace Jackie had fought for and earned. Her mind wandered back to the decision she had made weeks ago to cooperate with the FBI and hand over the treasure that had once seemed like a golden ticket to a better life. At the time, it felt like the hardest choice she had ever made. But looking at her girls now, she knew it had been the right one. Her decision had led to immunity for her family. And although the weight of what she had done still lingered in the back of her mind, the overwhelming guilt had started to fade. She had feared that her daughters would never forgive her for keeping the treasure from them, for the lies, the secrecy, and the fear she had instilled in them. But the truth was finally out. The honesty, painful as it had been the bridge that brought them closer. Olivia, her once distant eldest daughter, had started to smile more. The burden of distrust had lifted between them, and they were beginning to share moments of closeness again. Jackie had seen Olivia's hesitation. The walls Olivia had put up to protect herself, but as they sat together talking, rebuilding their relationship one conversation at a time, she knew that their bond was becoming unbreakable. Lily, too, was less fearful now. The night terrors that had plagued her for weeks were becoming fewer, and the spark in her eyes was slowly returning. Jackie had always promised them a better life, and now she was delivering it, but the treasure was gone, returned to its rightful owners after a lengthy legal battle. DeLuca's associates, who had once threatened her family with violence, had been arrested, and the FBI had seized the treasure as evidence of their criminal activities. Jackie had given up the gold, the diamonds, the artifacts, all of it. She'd handed over the very thing that could have solved all her financial problems, but in the end, she had discovered that the things that mattered most could not be bought. It was a new beginning for her family, but it was a bittersweet one. Jackie had sacrificed so much to get to this point. The money that could have set them up for life was gone, but in its place, she had something far more valuable: the future. She had the love and trust of her daughters, a fresh start, and a chance to build a life based on integrity. With the finder's fee that came with returning the treasure, Jackie had started anew. It wasn't enough to live in luxury, but it was enough to get by without fear, without the constant threat of eviction or poverty. They had a place to call their own, one they could make their own. Jackie took the money and used it wisely. After moving into the new house, she began working with local charities, putting some of it towards starting a foundation for families in need. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Jackie had come to understand that wealth wasn't about the things you could buy. It was about the things you could give. And that's exactly what she did. The foundation she started became her mission, a way to give back for all the struggles she had faced and to help others find the stability she had fought for. She worked tirelessly, using her story, her experience, and her new position to help those who were going through similar hardships. Her foundation provided safe housing for families who, like her, had nowhere to turn. It was a place of hope, a place for people to rebuild their lives. She didn't have much to give, but what she did have was invaluable: the knowledge that no one should have to live in fear, that everyone deserved a chance at a fresh start. As the days passed, Jackie found herself thinking less about the treasure. She didn't need it to be happy. She had learned that the real treasure was the stability she had secured for her family, the love and trust that had been restored. She had made mistakes, but she had also made things right. It wasn't the life she had expected, but it was a life she could be proud of. Jackie had finally found peace, and she had done it without compromising her morals or the safety of her daughters. Looking out at the horizon, watching Olivia and Lily play without a care in the world, Jackie knew that their future was bright. The past was behind them now, and though it had shaped them, it didn't define them. The road ahead would be difficult, no doubt, but Jackie was no longer afraid. She had fought for her family, and she had won. The house on Maple Street was now just a memory, an ugly chapter in a story of redemption, struggle, and, ultimately, a new beginning. It had been the catalyst for Jackie's transformation, the wake-up call that had shown her what truly mattered in life. It had taken the loss of everything she had thought she wanted to realize that the things that meant the most couldn't be bought, they could only be earned. And in the end, Jackie had earned the most precious thing of all: a future for herself and her children, built on honesty, love, and the understanding that the greatest treasure was not gold or diamonds, but family. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jackie stood in the doorway, watching her daughters, her heart full. There would be challenges ahead, but she knew now that they could face anything together. For the first time in a long while, Jackie felt a sense of peace. Her journey had been long, but it had led her to exactly where she was supposed to be. What a journey it's been for Jackie and her family. From the struggles of homelessness to the discovery of unimaginable riches, Jackie's path wasn't just about surviving, it was about finding redemption and the true meaning of family. If you're inspired by Jackie's transformation and want to learn more about her courageous decision to rebuild her life, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update on more stories of resilience, hope, and the power of second chances. Got a story like Jackie's? Share it in the comments below. We'd love to hear how you overcame your own struggles. Remember, the real treasure lies in the love and strength we find within ourselves and our loved ones. Until next time, keep believing in new beginnings.